Greetings, everyone, Muslim, non-Muslim, ex-Muslim, and everyone in between. In this video, I want to talk about 10 harmful effects of Salafiyyah that I managed to overcome. In a previous video, I talked about 10 Salafi things that I still do. This one, I want to focus a little bit more on those things that I've moved away from. It's been close to 3 years now since I left Salafism, and I'm still fighting the lasting effects that religion can have on the human mind, even after choosing to be non-religious. Now, these 10 harmful effects of Salafiyyah, I've listed them on those areas that were most important to me. So unlike the other video where I just was random, this one I'm going to actually go from the first most important all the way to the 10th least important as far as for myself. So the first harmful effect of Salafiyyah is indoctrination. And this is the biggest one for me. So Salafis, they use indoctrination through cult-like behavior. And using the Islamic text, they dictate on their followers how you think, how you speak, how you dress, how you eat, who you marry, who you befriend or you should take as an enemy, even what masjid you should worship in and which masjid you shouldn't go to, who, as far as authors to read or not read, who to take Islamic knowledge from or not take Islamic knowledge from, who is on the manhaj, who's off the manhaj. Every single aspect of life is controlled by the Salafis in the name of indoctrination. A Salafi in reality becomes dependent on not only the religious doctrine and ideology, but on a group of people dictating and judging. And this is harmful because it does not allow a person to be their own individual, to have their own autonomy and independence, or even to congregate with other people who are different or have different belief systems and ideologies. Now that I am no longer a Salafi Muslim, I follow myself and I follow what makes sense to me. I'm an independent free thinker. I'm a skeptic, and I use critical thinking skills to determine if what someone says is true or just bullshit. So that's the first one. The second harmful effect of Salafiyyah would be sex shaming. When I was a Salafi, I was taught that men and women should never be alone together unless they're married or they're unmarriable relatives, like your aunt or your mother or your sister. It's not permissible to even look at a woman, not even in her eyes, and touching a woman was one of the worst of sins. And even listening to a woman's voice was just as sinful. It was considered awra. Anything that's out of marriage related to sex is considered a big sin. So masturbation or sex out of wedlock is definitely looked down on. Now, Salafi youth are encouraged to marry at puberty, and it's not uncommon to see Salafi girls as young as 14 getting married off. One of my ex-wives was actually that same age when she married her first husband. She was 14. I was engaged to my first ex-wife when she was 16, and then I actually married her at 17 when I was 20. And we ended up divorced 5 years later. And even today, Salafis in their teens and the early 20s, they're rushing to marry only to end up divorcing simply because of these unhealthy and harmful attitudes surrounding sex and honor. Now that I'm no longer Salafi, I have a different view. And for me, men and women should be allowed to get to know one another instead of rushing into marriage. So just imagine a Salafi couple moving in together, using birth control for a year just to see if they're compatible. And then after a year, both would know if it would work out or they need to move on. You know, no hard feelings, wish you the best, and find that partner that's compatible sexually, mentally, physically, religiously, etc. That would curb a lot of the divorces and even the children that are caught in the middle of it all because, people rushed in that first year or two. It would also show young men how to please their women, because these young women, they're sexually frustrated with these 2-minute brothers that, they want orgasms just like the men get them. And it's harmful when opposite sexes don't get to know one another. And I include those who later discover that they're either bisexual or gay. So, let people find out who they are sexually on their own. Religion shouldn't dictate this. And then finally, there's nothing wrong with masturbation for either sexes. Ladies and gentlemen, play with yourself as much as you want and find out what you enjoy. Explore your body. It's yours. And don't be ashamed to do something that we all have a craving for. Masturbation is beautiful, and it's a form of practice for the real thing. And for some of us, we even have found that it's even better than real sex in some cases. So now that I'm no longer Salafi, I enjoy healthy sexual relationships, and I've experienced a few girlfriends. And those girlfriends were Muslim. So while those relationships, of course, they didn't work out, the fact that I can be in normal relationships free of religious ideology, that gives me the confidence for that time when I find that special someone to grow into a relationship with. The third harmful effect of Salafiyyah is instilling an inferiority complex in women. Now, when I was Salafi, I used to view women from the aspect of the Islamic text, which holds that women are a fitna, they're a trial and a tribulation to men. And I held the opinion that a woman should cover from head to toe, and that covering the face was the best practice so as to avoid tempting men. Women are not to be seen or to be heard. They must exist behind a curtain, secluded from the eyes of men. And this idea of jealousy and honor are oddly also recommended for the Salafi men to show their admiration, so-called admiration and respect for women. Salafi Islam also promotes the idea that women are subhuman and below men in an intellect, in inheritance, and even in religious duties. So when it comes to the harm, this type of thinking is harmful to women because women should be the ones to decide how they want to live, what they want to do with their lives, how they want to dress, who they want to sleep with, who they don't want to sleep with, and how they want to believe. Women are just as capable as men. And while there are biological differences that men and women differ in, there are also other areas where we are very much the same and equally as human. Now, as an ex-Salafi, I no longer view women in this way, and I hold an egalitarian viewpoint about the sexes. I now have a few female acquaintances, both Muslim and non-Muslim, and I've enjoyed going out with them just to hang out or to talk or to enjoy just a nice dinner at a fancy restaurant. And also, I've remained in contact with my ex-wives. In 3 of them, I consider as close friends, and likewise for them, they've said the same thing to me. So the fourth harmful effect of Salafiyyah is fear of a hellfire. When I was a Salafi, I had this unhealthy fear of this imaginary place called An-Nar, the Islamic hellfire. This horrible place is a place of punishment where Allah, He burns skins and replaces them, or He rips mouths open with hooks, and then He returns them back to their original state just so He can do it over and over again. And this goes on for eternity. In the list of punishments, I haven't even scratched the surface. That's not even the total of the list of punishments in the hellfire, and they're endless. But in reality, if we think about it, only a sadistic and cruel person would wish for such a place to really exist. It's not only harmful, but it's abusive to threaten children or loved ones with punishment in such a place. If you can't prove it exists, stop using it to control others. Since I no longer believe in hell, I'm more at ease with my life. I no longer live in fear or anxiety of such a place. My fears and my anxieties are based on real world problems, not fictitious ones. I find that the hell really only exists in this life and what's around certain people. And our brother Hassan Ridwan, he has a great video on this subject, and I'm going to link it in the description box so you can take a look if you want to. Okay, so let's move on to the fifth harmful effect of Salafiyyah. And that's use of the moiety against Muslims, non-Muslims, and even ex-Muslims. When I was a Salafi, I viewed the world in black and white terms. There's no gray. Muslims versus the kuffar, right? And then in between that, you have Muslims versus the munafiqun, the hypocrites. And then you have the murtadun, those who are apostates. And only Muslims who were Salafi Muslims and who believed like I did were viewed as my brothers and sisters in faith. The non-Muslim was viewed as the enemy, and the deviant Muslims were, I wanted them just to be guided back, but we were harsh with them, and we did that so that they could come back to the fold. So dividing people based on religious beliefs, it's just as harmful as dividing people based on color or ethnicity. Also, religious beliefs, they can't be proven, and they're subjective and biased, especially religious belief that is divisive. Now, as an ex-Salafi Muslim, I no longer view the world with such contempt. I look at everyone as fellow human beings, religious, non-religious, or in between, even Salafis. And while I disagree with almost everything that they believe in, I still hold them to be my brothers and sisters. And I make videos like this in the hopes of bridging the gap with Salafis, especially the closed-minded ones. And I do that not to demonize Salafis, but to humanize them and to show them where they're wrong in their beliefs and in their thinking. Now, the sixth harmful effect of Salafiyyah is unreal religious expectations or never feeling good enough for Allah. Now, when I was Salafi, my constant acts of ibadah, of worship, never seemed to be like that of the Prophet or his companions. In fact, worshiping the way they did seemed almost impossible to me. And that's because the Prophet and his companions are mythicized in the area of worship, acts of worship. And it's to the point where Muslims today, they feel the stress of trying to emulate a person and his followers in a way that can't be done. Also, the amount of prohibitions and rules makes many Muslims, Salafi Muslims especially, feel more like sinners than being normal human beings that are always prone to error. And this is connected to that fear of hellfire. So the harmful part is trying to follow someone or set a set of religious rules to the letter. And that's not only ignorant, it deprives that person from being autonomous and independent, as I spoke about. Also, expecting people to pray all the time or to always be religious is impossible. If we think about when we read about the Prophet always waking up for Taraweeh, or he was always praying, you got to remember the time that he came from. I mean, they were living out in the desert. It's desolate. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have all these things that we have today. They had a lot of time on their hands, and they used that time to do such things as praying constantly or fasting constantly. So we live in a different time, and our circumstances are different. And as an ex-Salafi Muslim, I know that without these unreal religious expectations in my life, I can devote my time to benefiting myself and others. And I have more time in being a better person, as well as more time to focus on myself and to develop into being a better human being. The seventh harmful effect of Salafiyyah is the obsession with death. And when I was a Salafi, I was constantly obsessed with death, with my death, with others who were going to die. Every morning I woke up, I would think to myself, I'm going to die. Am I ready? Am I prepared for death? I mean, it's because of the culture. I mean, you hear the Salafi ulama, they're always talking about death. The lay people are always talking about death. Tulab al-ilm always talking about death. Everything is just death, death, death. They constantly talk about death to the point of unhealthy fear. And some Salafi Muslims, they develop depression and anxieties because of their constant worry of dying. And while it's normal to acknowledge death, it's not normal to use it to frighten others or to threaten others. And we see that in a Friday khutbah or in durus, in the lessons. Death is always being used and leveraged as a tool to control people. And as an ex-Salafi now, I know that instead of always thinking about death, I can busy myself with living. I know I only have one life and I need to live that life to the fullest. I need to give it meaning, the meaning that I want, and not one where death consumes my mind. I know I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die one day, and I've accepted my mortality, but I would rather face death as something that is a part of living. Like every living thing, I'm going to die, like the animals, like other organisms, like other humans. I'll face death, but now I'm content in facing it on my own terms, on my own way, not dictated by religious beliefs. The eighth harmful effect of Salafiyyah is obsession with heaven. When I was Salafi, all I thought about was getting to Jannah, the Islamic heaven. The Quran and the Hadith literature, they have full descriptions of heaven. So if you want to read the Quran, you can read it. My take now, it's a place of partying, it's orgies, buck naked women. Everything you can't do in this dunya, in this life, you'll do in the akhirah, in the hereafter. All of my actions were focused on trying to get to Jannah so that I could be with my fellow believers and everybody who believed the way I did. And that's harmful because, like hell, heaven cannot be proven. And it's used in the same way as well. If you behave and follow the rules, Allah gives you Jannah. You get out of line, you disobey, you don't go. Or you go partially, right? It has the same harms as believing in hell. But now as an ex-Salafi Muslim, I don't believe not only in the Islamic Allah, but in a hereafter. I no longer do good things to gain a reward. There's no brownie points or point system written down by angels that I need to follow. I do good things because as a human being, it feels good to do it, and I do it to benefit others. I don't need religion or belief in a rewarding deity to do good in the world. Heaven is right here on earth for me, and that's the heaven that I make for myself. The ninth harmful effect of Salafiyyah is obsession with religious purity. When I was Salafi, I was always consumed with being ritually pure and viewing the non-Muslims as najis or ritually filthy. Even after sex, I tried to make a full ghusl. I avoided touching dogs. I made sure to douse my clothing in water if anything impure got on it or in my shoes. And I also viewed Muslim women who didn't cover or non-Muslim women as filthy and dirty because in my mind, they didn't cover or they didn't make istinja or because they didn't have shaved pubic hairs. And that's harmful. Thinking that one is religiously pure than others is wrong. Thinking others are impure because of hygiene is also wrong. And Salafi Islam teaches the Salafi that they're the ones who are the only ones making wudu, making the movements that you do with water before you pray, making a full ghusl like a bath, that they're the only ones shaving the private parts and washing themselves up. And that non-Muslims don't do that. But now as an ex-Salafi, I know, having been around many non-Muslims and non-religious Muslims, I know they're just as hygienic and religious Muslims or more, or some of them are not. And I'm talking about the non-religious Muslims. So religious purity, it's a myth. It can be proven. No one can show how clean the heart or soul is. Like they say, the ran on the qalb, this metaphorical, figurative concept that you have sin soiling the heart. Nobody can prove that. Nobody can show us in an X-ray what that looks like, or do an autopsy and show us a heart like that. This is all just religious belief. And finally, the 10th harmful effect of Salafiyyah was obsession with the jinn. When I was a Salafi, I attributed every illness, physical or mental, to the jinn. The jinn are an unseen creation. They're equivalent to humans, and their purpose, just like human beings, is to also be Muslim. If they're bad jinn, they're called shaitan. The plural is shayateen. And the main shaitan is Iblis, which is Satan. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I wrote a post on my blog. It's on the description box, and where I talk about Satanism versus Salafism. It's a little post, nothing too much in detail, but it'll go into more than what I want to do here with this video. So if you want to, you can read more about it there. But moving along, the non-Muslim jinn possesses humans and makes them ill, according to the Salafis. And this is based on Islamic text. Some even fall in love with Muslims and marry them and have children. I've never seen anyone prove that, but I've read this in books by Sheikh bin Baz and others that believe in this. And it's considered haram to marry the jinn, the female jinn, or the male jinn, vice versa. And there's this constant urge of Muslims should always be diligent of the jinn and to repel it through prayers and du'as and ruqyah. And that's harmful. Attributing anything to a mythical creature takes away the responsibility of human agency. And Salafi Muslims, they blame everything on the jinn. Even other Muslim groups do the same thing, to the point that they neglect those who are mentally ill or those who do wrong, who do crimes and the like. They'll say, you got a jinn in them. But as an ex-Salafi now, I know that humans are responsible for their own actions, not this fairy tale creature they can't prove exists. And when someone is mentally ill, I know now it's not because of a jinn in them, or when someone does something wrong like killing or cheating on their wife, it's not because of a jinn. And I let the ultra-religious know. I try to educate them about these realities of mental illnesses and of these false concepts of sin that lead to this type of thinking and other behaviors that people do, and try to get them to understand that they should be responsible for their own actions or understand those who have mental illnesses. So those are my 10 harmful effects of Salafiyyah. I hope that any Salafi or Salafis who are having doubts or have recently decided to leave Salafi Islam, I hope that you find this video beneficial. There is a link to a post on my blog about leaving religion, and you can feel free to visit the site. There's also a great resource on there that talks about those who are struggling with the after effects of religion. And until the next video, stay gold.